Today we will talk about deported Ukrainians who are being sent straight to the trenches. We will also look at this situation through the eyes of the Ukrainian government. We will analyze who actually created this trap and who is responsible for it. But we will also talk about how this issue is covered in the American press, which is fighting against Trump, and that this coverage doesn't always reflect reality. From time to time, I will also give you quotes from statements by Ukrainian bloggers, journalists, and politicians in order to, let's say, support my point of view. And at the end, I will tell you something important that neither CNN nor NBC mentioned, something that I would say turns the whole picture upside down. So, the facts. On November 17, 2025, a plane departed from the United States to Poland. On board were 50 Ukrainian citizens, 45 men and 5 women. All of them were in handcuffs. They were deported by ICE, the immigration police of the Trump administration. In Poland, they were handed over to Polish officials. They were taken to the Ukrainian border. Out of the 45 men, 24 were wanted for draft evasion. They were immediately handed over to the police. The police, in turn, sent them to the military enlistment office. One of them is Vladimir Dudnik, 28 years old, a tattoo artist. He came to the U.S. in 2019 on a student visa. His visa was canceled. He applied for asylum. He was waiting for a decision. He was detained near the courthouse in Pittsburgh in a case about driving without a license. Naturally, as you might guess, without insurance. And he was deported. When I was flying home, I hoped to at least see my parents, said Dudnik. Instead, I was sent straight to a training camp, 51 days of preparation, then a drone operator course. Now I'm at the front in eastern Ukraine, and my fellow soldiers gave me a call sign, America. I was hoping to at least see my parents. It sounds very pitiful. Pitiful, and very much in CN's style. But it's stupid. At least that's how it seems to me. Another story, we'll talk about it a bit later, in detail. The story of the family of Darina and Zhenya. We won't mention the last name. They came in 2022 through Biden's program. Uniting for Ukraine, that's what it was called, legally, with a sponsor. In 2024, they applied to extend their status. Darina got it, but Zhenya did not. You asked the homeowner for permission to stay, and the homeowner said, "Sorry, but you can't stay." Then Zhenya decided to deceive the homeowners and hide. He was supposed to leave, but he didn't. And he stayed in the U.S. illegally. He was caught, and they decided to deport him through the court system. In March 2026, he agreed to leave voluntarily to avoid forced deportation. He says he has health problems with his spine, and his wife says that in Ukraine, even people with severe disabilities are being drafted now. That sounds a bit strange. With severe disabilities, like for example, without a leg, right? They are being drafted into the army. Well, I don't really know the situation, of course, and at the very least, I'll say that personally, I don't really believe it. But again, let's continue. The third story. Ruslan, 26 years old. Again, we'll talk about this story as well. He was stopped on the road. Well, he had his documents, as he says, but he left his passport at home. That was enough, according to CNN. They just drove up from behind, asked for his documents. He gave them his driver's license. They asked for his passport. He didn't have it. They said he was an illegal. They put handcuffs on him. They put him in the car. Nobody asked anything. And then straight across the border, right? But that's what Ruslan said. Or maybe CNN just pretended to believe it. Do you believe that in the United States of America, just because a person has a passport, but doesn't have it with him, they put handcuffs on him, put him in a car, and send him to Ukraine for that? A sob story. If that were the case, then many times when I was asked to show my documents, I would have said, I don't have any documents. They would put me in a car, take me to the airport, and send me to Ukraine. Because what I just told you is exactly what Ruslan told us. Or rather, not even Ruslan, but CNN. God knows what he told them there. After that, the sympathetic CNN correspondent says, 3 stories, 3 people, 1 result, the trenches. I personally wanted to cry right away. CNN quotes the lawyers, among those detained, there are people whose spouses are U.S. citizens. Spouses are U.S. citizens. Children are U.S. citizens. Some are not even citizens of Ukraine at all, says CNN. They were born in the USSR before Ukraine became a separate state. Well, don't you think there's a bit of manipulation going on here? Just because a person was born in the USSR before Ukraine became a separate state and then lived in Ukraine, according to the country's law, if you believe CNN, he supposedly shouldn't have to serve in the army. Whether it's worth defending or not, whether a person wants to defend it or not, whether he has parents or loved ones there who, after he leaves, someone else will have to protect, that's a separate question. The important thing is that a huge amount of information comes to us from English, Russian, and Ukrainian sources, which present all kinds of facts from an angle that is supposed to make you outraged by the actions of Trump and his government. Now, I want to give you a quote. Vladimir Yelchenko is the former ambassador of Ukraine to the U.S. and the permanent representative to the UN. He gave an interview to Telegraph in 2026 in March, so that's very, very recent. Trump, he said, knows how to count money. It's hard to argue with him on that. But when it comes to geopolitical and strategic issues, he's really lacking in that area. As my Georgian relatives would say, relatives of Yelchenko, or what's his name, Yelchenko. Yelchenko thinks he's better than Trump, but he's worse. And here's a quote from Kasparov. Well, it's from 1925, actually. Trump is not interested in Russia, Ukraine, or America. So what is Trump interested in then? Kasparov answers, Trump is interested in Trump. I understand that Kasparov is not Ukrainian, but he was interviewed by a Ukrainian channel which spread his words all over Ukraine. They didn't interrupt him. They could have interrupted and said, "Excuse me, how do you know this? Please prove it," but no one asked. So it went through, as they say, as the absolute truth. Okay, here's another story that CNN published in November 1925. So, with the last name Surovtsev, well, they said that the first and last names were changed. He was born in Mariupol. Back then it was the USSR. He came to the US as a child. He doesn't speak Ukrainian. He doesn't speak Russian. He forgot. He also forgot the Russian language. He came from Mariupol and doesn't speak Ukrainian at all. He's been living in America for decades. He's married to an American woman. So, being married to an American woman means that she has an American passport. This is the case they're talking about, where the American passport means the wife has one, and if there are kids, probably the kids too, right? ICE is trying to deport him. But where to? It turns out, according to CNN, to Ukraine. But Ukraine says, we can't confirm his citizenship. And Russia says the same thing. In 2015, they refused to give him documents. So he tried to apply for Russian documents. He's a man without a country, literally, without a country. His city, Mariupol, is almost completely destroyed today, CNN reports. The infrastructure is destroyed and thousands are dead. He can supposedly only be deported to his city, but it's unclear which country. Well, okay. And his wife says deporting him there is just sending him to die, just more slowly than at the front. So basically, Americans know that when someone goes to the front on the Ukrainian side, he will definitely die. The state, our state, responds, it doesn't matter, because there's a paper saying he'll die. He's Ukrainian, so he goes there. And what kind of paper do they have that says he's Ukrainian? Don't you think that's absolute nonsense and a lie? So basically, some state of the United States of America, without filing a lawsuit, even though there are lawyers who, for some reason, also don't file a lawsuit, some state decides to expel a person who is married to a citizen of the United States of America. That's what we were told. But nevertheless, he is taken away without trial or investigation. If I didn't know anything about the American judicial system, maybe I would have a hard time believing it, but I might believe it. I hope you understand that there was more than one court hearing in this case. At least, there should have been. I hope you understand that as soon as a person officially marries an American woman in America, he is put in line for a fairly quick process to get at least the right to work and the right to stay here. Not to mention if he also has children who are American citizens, which means, as they said, that Mr. Surovtsev, as we were told, that not a single court and not a single immigration service wanted him to stay in the USA. And then they said, the government responds, it doesn't matter that you have a family, that you have a wife, that you've lived here for many years. None of that matters. Go fight in Ukraine. To me, this means they think we're fools. And now another quote. Ukrainian military expert Yuri Kashanov, The Comments of Ukraine Portal, July 1925. Trump is acting according to secret agreements. He knows absolutely for sure. This Kasyanov, he learned all this from his namesake, with similar agreements to the Molotov-Ribbentrop Pact. Wow. And he's ready to gradually hand over Eastern Europe to Russia's control. Kasyanov knows this for sure. He was sitting under the table or under the bed and heard when Putin and Trump were making deals about espionage on that bed that all of this was happening. In fact, Trump, says Kasyanov, has turned into an open agent of the Kremlin. I emphasize once again, this is Yuri Kasyanov. What do you think when Trump is accused of colluding with fascists, when this is broadcast to the whole world, repeated in the Ukrainian press, and the same is said by Ukrainian experts, bloggers, journalists, and so on, that he is an agent of the Kremlin? Does Trump have more or less desire to help Ukraine in this case? Okay, let's move on to the Ukrainian government. So let's approach this from another angle. What does the Ukrainian government want and why? Ukraine has been at war with Russia for more than 4 years now. The losses are enormous. According to the Ukrainian Ministry of Defense, about 2 million men are listed as wanted. They did not report to the draft offices or violated mobilization rules. Another 200,000 soldiers deserted their units. Can you even imagine these numbers? 2 million men of conscription age ran away, unwilling to defend their country. 200,000 soldiers who had already been given uniforms and weapons also deserted their units, possibly even while on duty, and disappeared, either deep in Ukraine or abroad, after paying military commissars for a certificate. They also don't want to defend their country, and the military commissars don't care because they're making millions. The Ukrainian army is experiencing a severe shortage of personnel. This isn't propaganda, it's a fact acknowledged by all sides, including the Western allies of the Kremlin. The only hope is for who? Trump. So now it's time to quote Dmytro Gordon, a Ukrainian journalist. It's already the 25th year, Gordon, let me tell you. A person who does everything Putin wants is called a Putin agent. And it doesn't matter whether they're paid or not. It doesn't matter, I agree. Considering that Dmitry Gordon broadcast to a large number of Russians and Ukrainians, his statements end up on Trump's desk as a report on Ukrainians' opinions about the President of the United States of America. From the point of view of the Ukrainian government, the logic is simple. Every man of conscription age who is abroad while others are dying is a problem, especially if he left after the war began, obtained legal status abroad, and does not intend to return. Kyiv has officially asked several European countries not to issue documents to Ukrainian men without a certificate of registration at the military enlistment office. In March 2026, Norway announced that it would no longer grant temporary asylum to Ukrainian men of conscription age. Well, without a deferment, without the proper documents, yes. A plane with deportees from the U.S., from Kyiv's point of view, is reinforcements. A few more people for the ranks. But here comes a question that the Ukrainian government doesn't like to hear. If a state wants people to fight for it, shouldn't that state be the kind of place people actually want to fight for? Corruption in Ukraine was systemic long before the war. It's true that Zelensky said that with his arrival, corruption disappeared, it's gone, it won't exist anymore, and so on. But you lied. You lied, Volodymyr Oleksandrovich. Oligarchs controlled politics, the courts, the media. People were fleeing from Ukraine, and not in 2022, in 2014, in 2010, and 2000. The war just sped up this process. And now let's listen to the blogger and activist from the Mejlis. So, the Crimean newsfeed is also from May 2025. Trump once again confirmed what I've always said, that he's a Putin agent. He's a completely dependent figure. A pawn on this board. That is, Trump is a pawn. And I think the Mejlis people are queens. And at this moment, they're begging the pawn. From this very Ukraine, give us money, please, and give us more. Please, please, please. A state that for decades did not create conditions for life is now demanding that people sacrifice their lives. This is, well, at the very least, a contradiction that the Ukrainian government cannot resolve by force. You can deport thousands, but you can't force them to fight with faith in victory if that faith doesn't exist. And here, having moved with great fanfare from Russia to Ukraine, is Alexander Nevzorov. So, a quote. We see that Trump accepts gifts. That's what he does best. It's accepting valuable gifts, preferably made of gold. He showed how royally, how magnificently he accepted the crown and the order in South Korea. That is, Trump really loves little gifts. And, says Nevzorov, he became a professional at receiving them. Sasha. Mamma mia. I wanted to say something else, but I switched to Italian. I will say that Alexander Nevzorov is incredibly professional in trying to turn Ukraine against the only person who can help it in its fight against Russia. Was this the main or maybe even the only reason for his move? We don't know. But it seems that at the request of Kremlin comrades, Zelensky immediately granted Nevzorov Ukrainian citizenship and everything that Nevzorov's heart desired at that moment. Before we move on to the next point, namely bringing Israel into this same discussion, a small request. If you're watching this video and want to see this kind of analysis regularly, click the bell right now. It's the only way to guarantee that YouTube will show you the next episode. And subscribe if you haven't already. It's free and it's important, and it will only take 5 seconds.
Итого.
Why do Israelis volunteer to go fight, while Ukrainians and Russians run in the opposite direction? When Israel started the war in Gaza in October 2023, something amazing happened. Thousands of Israelis living abroad in the US, Europe, Australia, anywhere, bought tickets home on their own, voluntarily. Reservists were returning without waiting for a draft notice. Some interrupted their vacations, left their jobs, and took overnight flights. American Jews were packing their suitcases at airports in New York and Los Angeles and flying to a country where rockets were whistling overhead. And now a different picture. When Russia announced mobilization in September 2022, hundreds of thousands of men fled. Finland, Georgia, Kazakhstan, Mongolia, Armenia. The lines at the borders stretched for dozens of kilometers. People abandoned their cars and walked. When Ukraine imposed martial law and banned men from leaving, many still found ways to escape. Romania, through Hungary, through Moldova, swimming across rivers, risking their lives. And here is a conversation about the President of the United States of America between Vitaly Portnikov and, as I suspect, a regular employee of the State Security Committee, Fagin. Just to be clear, I was not present when Fagin signed the pledge to faithfully serve the shield and sword of the Russian Federation. A quote from Portnikov. Amid Fagin's thoughtful silence and tacit approval, as I understand it, both of them are experienced economists with huge achievements. So then, what's his name? Portnikov. Trump's understanding of economic policy is like that of some 19th century Midwesterner. He has nothing to do with the economy at all. That's what billionaire Portnikov said to zillionaire Fagin regarding Ukrainian deserters. This isn't a coincidence or individual cowardice. It's a systemic phenomenon that needs explanation. The first factor is identification with the state. An Israeli living in New York identifies himself with Israel not because the state tries to force him, but because he feels that this is my country, my people, my family under threat. He himself is the state, his friends, his family. He is part of a project that was built before his eyes, that he invested himself in. A Ukrainian or a Russian fleeing mobilization feels differently. This state wants to use me as expendable material in a war that I didn't choose, that I don't understand, that will give me nothing. That's a fundamental difference. It's not about bravery or patriotism in the relationship between a person and the state. These relationships were built over decades, not in a single day. The second factor is trust in the army as an institution. An Israeli soldier knows he won't be abandoned. I was an Israeli soldier. I know for sure I won't be abandoned. The system works. There is medical care. There is evacuation of the wounded. There is communication with the family. There is legal protection. The army is professional, with traditions, with a culture of mutual respect between officers and enlisted men. Maybe they command us, but they're just people like us. Ukrainian and Russian soldiers, especially early in the war, faced unique challenges. No bulletproof vests or proper communication. Commanders abandon their positions. The wounded are not evacuated. Food, canned goods, Soviet weapons from somewhere back in the 80s. Trust in the army as an institution is not an abstraction. It's a question. If I go, will they protect me? If I get wounded, will they save me? If I die, will my family get what was promised? In Israel, the answer is yes. In Russia and Ukraine, the answer is no. Too often, the answer is no. Now, the third factor is the meaning of the war. Israelis understand what they are fighting for. Hamas killed their neighbors, their relatives, their friends. October 7, 2023 is not an abstraction. These are specific names, specific kibbutzim, specific photos on fences all over Israel. The threat is visible and slow-moving. A mobilized Russian in 2022 asked himself, for what? For the denazification of a country where the president is Jewish. For the defense of Donbass, which he had never even thought about in his life. For historical borders, which were explained to him on TV 3 days before he got his draft notice. Many didn't understand why they should give their lives for this and ran away. A Ukrainian who dodged the draft in 2024 to 2025 was often not someone who didn't want to defend Ukraine. It was a person who didn't believe that his sacrifice would change anything. Who saw his friends die, but the front line didn't move even a kilometer. And who was tired. War fatigue is not cowardice, gentlemen. It's a human reaction to meaninglessness. And judging by the behavior of the Ukrainian leadership, what is happening on the battlefield is meaningless. And 25, 27, sometimes 30,000 people die for this every week. For meaninglessness. And the guys on TV, sitting at home, picking their teeth, they are the ones propagandizing. Go ahead, come on, go fight, not an inch of land. So it means Scheidelman is clearly a planted agent, doing everything possible to set up Ukrainians with Trump. And Trump has repeatedly expressed his attitude against Ukraine as follows. So this time, Trump messed things up with his words. This is a quote from Scheidelman. He smiled charmingly with all his remaining teeth while saying it. I think at that moment he was calculating how much he earned for that nastiness. 4,326 rubles and 11 kopecks. Let's be honest right away. I don't know how much they pay for nastiness involving Trump on air, but it can't be that all these Scheidelmans, Shvetsas, Shenderoviches, Portnikovs, Nevzorovs, Latininas, and others Pinkuses are saying all this for free. Although with Pincus, you never know. The others, especially, of course, Fagin and Nevzorov, definitely know the Quran prize. The fourth factor is the diaspora and the nature of emigration. The Israeli diaspora consists of people who left by choice, maintaining a strong connection with their homeland. They pay taxes to Israel, just so most people know. They vote in Israeli elections from abroad. They go home for holidays, for funerals, for weddings. Israel is not the past for them. It's the present, just in a different time zone. It's just more convenient for them here than there. And how many people fly back selling everything, saying, I miss Israel? The Ukrainian and Russian diasporas are different. They include people who left specifically because they wanted to break ties with the state, not with the culture, not with the language, not with family, but with the state, with corruption, with lawlessness, and most importantly, with hopelessness. When this state tells them, come back and die, they ask, what have you actually done for me? When I was leaving, you were in my way, not helping me. When I lived there, Did you give me any rights? Nothing. And now you want my life. And then there's the fifth factor. I would call it this, the history of statehood. Israel is a young state that was built on an idea. People came there from all over the world because they believed in that idea. The state was built from the bottom up. Through kibbutzim, through volunteer armies, through a common project. Ukraine and Russia are post-Soviet states that were built from the top down. The Soviet bureaucracy simply renamed itself. The relationship between the state and the citizen has not changed. The citizen is a resource. The state is a machine that uses this resource, squeezes it. I don't know, call it whatever you want, right? Squeeze, to use the English word. When such a state says duty, people hear use. That doesn't mean all Ukrainians or Russians are cowards. It means that states that haven't built trust with their citizens for decades can't demand sacrifices from them, or be surprised when they don't get it. There's a question that almost no one asks in these reports. CNN, MSN as they're called now. Do the deported have parents in Ukraine? Yes, most of them do, Dudnik said directly. I was hoping at least to see my parents. But he didn't see them. He was transported in handcuffs through Poland, past the country where his mother and father live, straight to a training camp. Think about this from the parents' perspective. Your son left several years ago. You know that he lives in America, works, is building a life. You either disapprove or approve of his choice, but he is alive. He calls. Sometimes he sends money. Maybe. And suddenly, silence. Then a call. Mom, I'm at the front. I was deported. I'm operating a drone. I don't know when we'll see each other. This isn't about politics. From their point of view, this is a human tragedy, and it is unfolding in thousands of families. I'm trying to say that you have to look at this from different perspectives. And now let's listen to the words of the Ukrainian political analyst Volodymyr Yelchenko. March 2026 Telegraph. Putin understood what Trump's weak point is and is using it. Trump never managed to grasp the essence of the problem. Neither what this war is nor what it means for people. He sees numbers and territories. He doesn't see the mothers waiting for their sons. He's talking about Trump, who claims that the most important thing is to stop the killing. So people are calmly saying the exact opposite of what's actually happening. And at the same time, they're absolutely sure of themselves. Or maybe they're not sure. Maybe they're just doing that. For money or out of weakness or for some other reason. Zhenya, whom we talked about, his wife stayed in the U.S. She has legal status in the U.S. He was deported. They are separated. Whose fault is that? Is it the American government that's to blame for this? Now then, remember I said at the beginning that I promised to say something that CNN didn't mention. Here it is, a few things. First, CNN told Dudnik's story as the story of a victim of Trump's system. And in a sense, he is a victim, of course. But CNN didn't ask a simple question. Dudnik came to the U.S. in 2019 on a student visa. Then his visa was revoked. He applied for asylum, got a work permit, and lived in the U.S. And he started driving, breaking traffic laws. Without insurance and without a license. He drove without a license or insurance. Do you realize what that could mean for anyone he might hit or, God forbid, kill? I hope you do. A person who asks a country for protection takes on the responsibility to respect its laws, to be a law-abiding citizen. Let the citizens of this country do whatever they want, but you must be law-abiding because you are asking for something. Even if it's just temporarily law-abiding, this is not a formality. This is the foundation of the agreement between you and the country. CNN didn't ask this question because it destroys the narrative of an innocent victim. Second, and even more important, who created this trap? The Uniting for Ukraine program? Biden gave people temporary status for 2 years. And then what? Without a path to permanent residency? There's no law, no rules, nothing with a clear future. They just allowed people to come here for 2 years. And then what? This program threw hundreds of thousands of people into a legal vacuum, where any minor violation became a reason for deportation, of course. It wasn't a humanitarian program. It was political theater. Biden looked kind, but he left people trapped. CNN is silent about this because Biden is one of their own. An official representative of the Trump administration stated directly on CNN, "The Biden administration has caused deep harm to hundreds of thousands of Ukrainians by using a humanitarian tool in ways it was never intended for, turning a narrow emergency aid tool into a mass admission program. The Trump administration is telling the truth." Well, all right. It's time, as they say, to start drawing conclusions. An Israeli who voluntarily goes to fight is making a choice. It's his life, his decisions, his values, his choice. That's the choice of a free person. Dudnik didn't have a choice. Not at any stage. Other people controlled his life. From the moment his visa was canceled to the moment he pressed the drone launch button, Thomas Paine wrote in 1776, "Government at its best is a necessary evil, and at its worst it is intolerable." Frederick Bastiat defined law as organized force to protect individual rights. Organized force to protect what? Individual rights. That's the essence of America, gentlemen. But when the law is used not for protection but to send a man to die, that's no longer law in any meaningful sense. That's just force dressed in a uniform. In Israel, at least in the Israel I lived in, no one told a man he is obligated to go fight for his homeland. We all just went and fought. And it seems, just like in June 1980, I rushed in New York, left rehearsals, the plays I was directing, and hurried to the airport. For what? To fly to Israel. That's how it is now. Israeli guys dropped everything they were doing and rushed aboard planes to fly home. Andrew Galambo said, "True freedom begins with the protection of a person's primary property, their life. No state, no law, no national security has the right to dispose of this property without the owner's consent. So the Israelis decide this themselves. They agree to risk their primary property, their lives, in order to protect the country." Why is it the 36th case? I've already talked about this, right? It seems that in both Russia and Ukraine, the owner's property called his life is disposed of without his consent. Anyone who feels like it. From this point of view, both the Ukrainian state and the Russian state have violated a fundamental principle. They disposed of a person's life without his consent and called it law. And if you break the law, you must be punished. Well, you might ask, why did I tell you all this? What are we supposed to do with this knowledge? I quoted some people, at the very least to see, to call things by their proper names. For the state, whether Ukrainian, American, or Russian, not to hide coercion behind words like law, duty, or protection. I'm not talking now about when someone came to our home without asking, and then when we asked him to leave, he started hiding and even breaking our laws. Here, of course, we have every right to say to him, "We love you very much, we even adore you. Well, get out. Either go back to where you came from or to any other place you want to go." Well, once again, I absolutely must mention Dmitry Gordon, yes? So, on Gordon's YouTube channel, there's an interview with former Soviet intelligence officer Sergei Zhurnov. September 2025. That's the introduction Gordon gives to the conversation. Could Trump be a KGB agent? Zhurnov says, yes, recruitment was possible. Trump, came to Moscow. He wanted to build Trump Tower. He met with the right people. Was he formally recruited? It's unknown. Well, at least it's unknown, right? General Omolchenko says he was just there, lying under the bed. But that's exactly how he acts, Putin Trump. But Trump acts, exactly the way a recruited agent would act. And he completely crossed out all the reasonable words he just said. Like, it wasn't me, it had nothing to do with me. After reading this, Trump immediately and very much wanted to help Ukraine with everything he could. That's the impression you get, and not just sometimes, but always. That these people are well paid by Russia to do everything they can to drive a wedge between Ukraine and Trump. Obviously, Shenderovich is the most foolish. Everyone knows that, right? He said the following. We can see from the Qatar story with the Qatari gifts that Trump is actually quite easy to simply buy. It turns out you can just bribe him a little. That's exactly how I quoted Shenderovich's words. You can just buy him a little bit. Unlike Trump, Shenderovich is not for sale. The truth is, the reason he's not for sale is because nobody needs him at all. If you find this analysis useful, there are two ways to support the channel. The first way is free. Click the bell and subscribe. Actually, the other way around, subscribe first, then click the bell. YouTube doesn't show our videos automatically. Only subscribers with the notifications see them first. It takes 5 seconds and costs nothing. And the second option is for those who want more, for $4 a month, less than a cup of tea. No, a cup of coffee. A cup of tea actually costs $3.70 here, but coffee is already over $4. Yes, you get access to extended versions of our analyses, additional materials, and videos that we don't publish publicly. You see the materials before anyone else. You see things that don't make it into the main release. The link to both will be below in the description. So, the wrap-up. I've already been talking with you for a long time. It's time to move on to the conclusion. Oh, how did it go again? So we sang and danced for you, got tired of singing and dancing. Ta-da-da-da-da. It's time to go to the buffet. Well, okay, I can't remember. This is from the Leningrad Kapusnik. Okay, for one person, an unwelcome emigre; for another, cannon fodder; for a third, a story for ratings. An Israeli is flying home to fight because he feels it's his home, his choice, his life. Dudnik is flying to the front because he has no choice. The difference between these two people is the difference between a free society and state machinery. The science of freedom says, a person is more important than the state. I really hope that in America this principle will be restored with Trump's help. And I really hope that someday people in other countries will start to understand it too. Until next time, goodbye.